different names. So it's the Sea of Galilee, Lake Gennesaret, Lake Tiberias, Sea of Gennesaret, which is what's in the Talmud, and then the Sea of Minya, all the same place, which is right here. It's approximately 33 miles in circumference, which is interesting to know because all through the Gospels, you've got people following Jesus around. So if you go all the way around it, it's 33 miles. It is 8 miles wide and 13 miles long. So I think this is just important because so much of Jesus' ministry takes place around this. The other thing about this area is that it starts, we're going to pretend like these are some of the mountains, and it starts up here with Caesarea Philippi, and there are underground springs, and it comes up out of this cave, and it comes down as the Jordan River, and it's probably not from me to this front row wide. It's not very wide at all. And so it comes down, it's fresh water, and then it hits right here, and it goes out to the 13 miles long, and it goes into the sea. And again, it's all fresh water, and then at this end, it goes down, and it goes back into the Jordan River, and you saw that picture about 2 weeks ago at Jesus' baptism. So it's not very wide at that point either. And it goes on down, and then eventually it gets here, and it goes into the Dead Sea. And it's the Dead Sea because water flows into it, but it doesn't flow out of it. These two rivers are the lowest rivers of sea level. They're both almost 1,000 feet below sea level. And again, they are both fed by the Jordan River. The Red Sea you can actually float in. I have floated in it. It's hard to get down to. You've got to walk and walk and walk, and it's really harder to get back up from. And if you have any place on your body that is has an open scab in it or anything, the salt content from that will burn it because it's a high salt content. But I wanted you to see what we're really talking about. It's beautiful there, and again, you can see the mountains in the background. Now, Jesus is there, and he sees two fishermen. Well, actually, he sees two boats and several fishermen that are there. And so let's go to the next slide. This is what a boat looked like at that point. Oh, I didn't give you the boat. This is from the boat. And you're looking out at the birds, and they probably didn't have this city there. In fact, I'm sure they didn't have this city there at that time. But the boats weren't very big. The whole hull of it was probably from that end down to right about here. And, of course, it had wooden gunnels to it, and it was for the fishing. And the fishing that they did back then, they had these nets, and they were real circular, and they had weights on them. And so they would have almost like a lasso, a long line on them, and they would do them over their head, and then they would throw them out. They would sink, and then the fish would come in, and then the nets would come up, and they'd haul the fish in. So Jesus comes down, and it says people are crowding in on him. So he's standing. Let's go back to the other one so they can see. Yes, so they're standing, and they're almost pushing him into the water. And they're pushing against him and pushing against him, and he sees these boats, and he goes, you know what, I'm going to go get in this boat. And so he gets in the boat, and these poor guys, they've now had their boats taken away from him, but they say, okay. And he pushes out. And, of course, as we know, water acts as a natural megaphone or microphone. And so he can sit down and talk to the people. The people can gather around, and they can hear what he has to say. And so he talks to them, and when he gets through, he comes back in. Now, I don't know about any of you, and I won't presume anything. But when I'm tired, I don't really want to have a lot of conversations with people. And I'm not always the happiest person around. And we have a story that goes through our family of our oldest son, Daniel, and he was probably about 5 or 6 at the time, and we had rented a house out on Crystal Beach. And they had been playing out all day long. And Daniel comes in at 5 years old, and he is old enough, he thinks, for his mother not to give him a bath anymore, but he has been buried in the sand. And I know as a mom, he's got sand in places he didn't even know he could get sand in. And he's tired and he's cranky, and we fed him, and it's time for him to go to bed. But he's got to have this bath first. He just has to. So I instruct him to go in and take a bath, and that I will come in and help him, to which we're staying with another family. So that was not going to help, because he was old and mature at 5. And he was not going to have his mother come help him. And I said, okay, but you have to make sure you get your back. And he looks at me, clear as day, and he goes, and how am I supposed to do that? Unhook my arms and turn them around backwards? And I said, well, Daniel, whatever it takes, but you need to get the sand off your back. So just an example of, he was tired and he was cranky and he had worked hard, and the last thing the child wanted to do was to worry about getting sand off of his back. And if I'd let him go to bed completely sand covered, he would have at that point in time. So these are the disciples that are standing there. Now it keeps talking about Simon and Simon and Simon, and Simon is Simon Peter. And it's so confusing, because there was another disciple that was Simon, and he was often called Simon the Lesser. And they think that's because he was probably shorter. But they refer to Simon, and then other places they refer to him as Peter, and they refer to him as Simon Peter. And it's just like this poor little sea. Is it a sea? Is it a lake? How many names is it going to have? But it's Simon Peter that's there. And then he is working with James and John. And James and John, their daddy was Zebedee, so they're called the son of Zebedee. And Zebedee means thunder. So oftentimes you'll see James and John and this thunder, kind of like a Harry Potter thunderbolt coming down, or a Thor one. So James and John are the sons of thunder, the sons of Zebedee. And then you have Simon Peter, and Simon Peter's brother is not mentioned here, but his brother's Andrew. And oftentimes, in other Gospels, Andrew's the first one that found Jesus and then brought Simon Peter to Jesus. But Andrew's not mentioned here. So you've got the 2 boats, and you've got Simon Peter in one, and you've got James and John in the other. And Jesus comes and tells them, after they have spent all night fishing and catching nothing, which I'm sure they didn't clock in and clock out. They probably spent a good 12, 14 hours out there trying to catch. After that, and after taking everything off the boat and cleaning it all, after all of that was done, Jesus comes up to him and he goes, get back in the boat and go back out. Oh yeah, I'm sure they were really excited to do that, because again, tired, exhausted. There's this principle called the HALT theory. HALT, H-A-L-T. Anybody heard of that principle before? It's called hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And if you make a decision where you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, any of those 4, or at our house, all of those 4, they're really bad decisions. And so here you've got these people, and they're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, and Jesus is saying, but I want you to go back out. Now, we talk about picking up our crosses and putting them back down. This was one of those moments for these guys. I mean, here is this person that they've heard of him, but they don't really know him at this point. He's confiscated their boats, and then he's got the audacity to come back and tell them, okay, now that I've taken your boat, I want you to get back in them, and I want you to go back out. Yeah, how many people would say, oh, sign me up for that. Give me another 14 hours out there. And then he doesn't just say go back out, but he tells them to go to the deep. And the deep is symbolic, because the deep is, we don't know what's out there. Now, currently, the deepest this lake gets is 141 feet, which is pretty deep in and of itself. But at that point, they didn't know how deep it was. But it did mean that they weren't going to be close to the shore. It meant that of the 13 feet across, they were going to have to go out, 13 miles across, they were going to have to go out about 7 to 8 miles. So it wasn't going to be an easy thing to do. It wasn't let's go after dinner and row out a couple of feet and put the things down. He was actually telling them, you're going to have to go work and do this. Yet they did it. They got in their boats. They got all of their equipment they just cleaned. They put them back in the boats. Again, they'd been working all night long, no sleep at all. And they go out into the deep, 7 or 8 miles. And they put the nets down. And there's so many fish in those nets that now they think this is wonderful initially, and then they're afraid the nets are going to break because there's so many fish in them. So they have to get another boat from shore to come on out to help get all of the fish, and they fill up their boat, they fill up the other boat, and then they have to drag the rest of all of the fish in. So this didn't happen in like 15 seconds. This took all day long to get this done too. But what it tells us and what it told them was those fish weren't just enough for those fishermen and their families. Those fish were enough for everybody that was there on the side to be fed. And those fish were enough not just to be fed for that day, but to be fed for days to come. And not just for those people there, but for them to take all they needed and to go home into their villages and to take those too. And so it was a very concrete way of Jesus telling them that I come and I give you from the deeps, from the places you don't want to go, from the places that are scary, from the places that nobody likes to admit are even there. I will give you everything you need, and not just enough for today, and not just enough for you, but enough for tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that, and not just for you, but for your neighbors and your neighbors' neighbors. Jesus tells us in this story that when we are in those deep, dark places that we don't want to go, after we are exhausted, after we are hungry and we're angry and we're lonely and we're tired and all of our reserves are gone, Jesus tells us from those deep, dark places, Jesus is with us. And Jesus gives us not only what we need, and not only what we need for that day, but what we need going forward to share with our neighbors, to share with our families, and to share forever and ever in generations coming. Now that's a lot in those one little story. But it's an important story to sum it up. And I have got a really cute Vacation Bible School, Sunday school song to share with you. So this afternoon, when the tune goes around and around in your head, you can thank me then. All right, so everybody needs to get their sailboats out. These are your sailboats. All right, we're going to see if I can do this with my left arm. I'm going to go ahead and switch now anyway. All right, so this is your sailboat. All right, so it goes like this. Peter, James, and John in a sailboat. Peter, James, and John in a sailboat. Peter, James, and John in a sailboat out on the deep blue sea. Now we're going to throw out the nets. Throw out the nets. Caught no fishes. Throw out the nets. Caught no fishes. Threw out the nets. Caught no fishes out on the deep blue sea. Along came Jesus walking by the water. Along came Jesus walking by the water. Along came Jesus walking by the water out on the deep blue sea. Get ready, we're going to throw out the nets again. Throw out the nets. Caught a lot of fishes. Throw out the nets. Caught a lot of fishes. Throw out the nets. Caught a lot of fishes out on the deep blue sea. All right, so there is something to take with you. And next time you're at a dinner party, say, I want to share something with you that you don't know about. But this story translates from the wee littles to the older than dirt and everybody in between. It's the story of God saying, I am there with you in the deep the depths of the ocean, when you're on your very last nerve, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, and I will give you everything, everything, everything that you need. You are not alone. And all God's people say, Amen.